Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to week 7, and we are working on Methodists this week. And so we're working on Phoebe Palmer and John Wesley. And so I'm going to start these lectures with Phoebe Palmer just because I've been really immersed in her work and in Dr. and now Dean Elaine Heath's work on Phoebe Palmer. Her book is entitled Naked Faith, The Mystical Theology of Phoebe Palmer. You have some good quotes to read from that. I didn't make you read the whole book because you are also reading this book. Now, hopefully this book is going to be really easy for you to read. You can see the print is really large. It should go by quickly. The main reason why I assigned this book is I just wanted you to get a sense of how Palmer uses scripture. She calls herself a Bible Christian, and you can see how she relies on her experience, but she relies so firmly on scripture. And so I think she really speaks to what we're doing in the church. To bring forward this idea of scripture and experience. And so, by the way, I wanted to let you know, I just discovered that Dr. Heath has been named Dean of the Duke Divinity School. So just in case you guys are thinking, here is Jana again leading us down the primrose path of Christian mysticism, and there's no real relevance and it's not really important. Dr. Heath's scholarship has been largely centered on Christian mysticism. She lectures on it. She wrote a book called The Mystic Way of Evangelism. She wrote this book, and now she's Dean of Duke Divinity School. So there you go. So starting off with Phoebe Palmer. What a wealth of, an amazing woman, and just an invaluable person for us to study in this class. John Wesley, also very important, obviously. But Phoebe Palmer, again, we're bringing forward someone that you may not be as familiar with, but who has really been significant in shaping the Christian faith. If you take a look on the second set of PowerPoints, she spoke very heavily into the formation of Pentecostalism, and so she really has been a significant person, in addition to helping found the Salvation Army, among other things. So she's very, very significant for our study. And so she was born in 1807. She's the founder of the Holiness Movement and was intimately involved in the Second Great Awakening. She traveled throughout US, Canada, and England, speaking, writing, evangelizing, leading revivals. She sparked a revival that brought nearly 1 million people to the church, and she was, she helped to found the Salvation Army. She lived a pretty long life, died in 1874. So I'm now on, of course, using PowerPoint number 1 on Phoebe Palmer, and we're now on slide 3. So the Holiness Movement really focused on the formation of the inner personality to reflect the glory and goodness of God. Now, if you've read the work, Elaine Heath's work, though, she made it quite clear that this was not just about, as I've been, speaking all along about this, it's not just about the formation of the individual. It's about the formation of the individual so that that individual can go out and build up the church. So, and that's exactly what Phoebe Palmer did. And so the Great Awakening was often considered a reaction against skepticism, deism, and rationalism. So you've got that, I've spoken about, kind of the Enlightenment and how Luther and Calvin's work was kind of narrowed and reinterpreted through the scholarship of the Enlightenment, the scholasticism, if you will, of the Enlightenment. That really also is tied to this idea of rationalism, and the country at this time was really not losing some of its Christian heritage, and so she rose up and was able to influence Baptists, Methodists, and Presbyterians. So she was born in New York City. Her maiden name was Worrell. Her parents, you can take a look at this, is all from slide 4. I'm just trying to give you some kind of historical background. Her father was a devout Methodist who experienced a religious conversion during the Wesleyan revival in England before immigrating to the US. So she had long roots in the Methodist Church. So what did she write? You know, sometimes it's interesting to look at what people wrote early on in their childhood and see how that impacted their lives. And what she wrote was this revelation, holy, just, and true, though oft I read, it seems forever new. While light from heaven upon its pages rest, I feel its power, and with it I am blessed. Henceforth, I take thee as my future guide. Let not from thee my youthful heart divide. And then, if late or early death be mine, all will be well, since, O Lord, I am thine. Pretty profound for a childhood poem, right? And I love the fact that she uses the phrase, all will be well, because that, of course, is a phrase that God revealed to Julian of Norwich many, many years prior to Phoebe's lifetime. And no doubt, I'm sure Palmer never read that Julian of Norwich, because Julian wrote in Middle English, and I don't think Palmer was that well educated to be able to read in Middle English. But Palmer did, she was amazingly well educated in terms of Bible knowledge and scripture, and so she grew up steeped in scripture, as we learned from slide 6. They had family devotions twice a day for an hour each. Puts me to shame there. Her father read from the Bible. They memorized verses. Theology was a major topic of home conversations. They had a sensitive religious conscience, and they wanted to lavish Christ with gifts, and that included, of course, service. But what really troubled Palmer for a long time early in her lifetime was the fact that she had not had this conversion experience. For instance, her father could point to a particular point in time and when he was converted and gave his life to Christ. And I think Palmer, because she grew up in this uber Christian household and she grew up close to God, as we can see, you know, she probably did not have that particular conversion experience, at least not in that way, you know, when she was young. But it was something that troubled her, because that was part of the Methodist faith at that time, was to be able to point to the moment when you had your conversion experience. And she wrote, though for many happy years she was enabled to testify with perfect assurance that she had passed from death unto life, yet the precise time when that change took place she could never state. Not to have an experience like most others born into the kingdom of Christ, who are so fully able from the overwhelming circumstances of that occasion to state the precise moment, was a fruitful source of temptation, resulting in years of painful solicitude. That comes from page 73 of The Way of Holiness. So Palmer, later in life, in 1827, she married Walter Clark Palmer, a homeopathic doctor and devout Methodist. She became interested in Wesley's doctrine of Christian perfection at this time, And her parents had done much to promote the Methodist Episcopal Church in New York City. So she was kind of tied to this Methodist Episcopal Church, married a Methodist, and so she really became steeped in Methodism. Her she had another experience that was significant, which was this helpmeets experience. And she writes, and now having been wary in the bestowal of my affections, I find them permanently and strongly affixed on one who I believe in the order of infinite love is in the order of infinite love designed to be a helpmeet. In religious, moral, and intellectual endowments, he stands approved. The best of all, that he is a servant of the Lord. On his 13th birthday, he was powerfully converted again. Her husband had a conversion experience, and she did not. And now, in his 24th year, he is still holding on his way. So this is Palmer writing about her husband, her helpmate, and how she experienced him. Now, one thing that I cannot emphasize enough is the impact on Palmer of the deaths of her children. I think for Palmer, we probably would not have had her writing, her work, her evangelism, etc., had it not been for the deaths of these children and her working on processing through that particular grief. And so she had 6 children, and 3 of whom died. So you can imagine how horrible it would be to lose one child. I can't even imagine. And by the way, I posted her poem written after the death of her first child, and it's so touching that I can't read it without crying. So it's a recommended reading if you are a parent, or if you can relate to that at all. I recommend taking a look at that poem. I excerpted parts out, so it's not too long, it's pretty short. So her first son, Alexander, died at 9 months. Her second son died at 7 weeks. The third child, Sarah, lived, and then the fourth child, Eliza, who was 11 months old, died in a fire, and this one just would have killed me. Phoebe had come home from some form of church meeting, and she was tired. She had, she instructed the nurse to bring the child to her, when she had come home, or around that time. And the nurse hadn't brought the child to her yet. And she, was roused with a start and ran to the child's room and discovered that the nurse had fallen asleep, knocked over a candle, which caught the gauze curtains surrounding the cradle on fire. And poor little Eliza was caught in this fire and died. And I can't, that would just be horrible. So needless to say. So later she had another daughter, Phoebe, who lived and went on to write popular hymns. And Phoebe reconciled herself to the deaths of her children by seeing them as part of God's plan. A very difficult thing to come to, I'm sure. But she was able to do that, and to use that death and those dark times to draw closer to God, rather than, you might be inclined to be so angry at God that you would want to push God away in the face of that experience. And instead, Phoebe used them to move closer to God. So clearly well worth, worthy of being considered maybe a Protestant saint who was able to transcend horrific experiences here on earth, but maybe not transcend them, but integrate them into her theology and her action. So I'm going to close this lecture so it doesn't get too long, and then I I will upload another lecture on the second PowerPoint. Take care.